Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Monday, February 14, 2022. Still hard to say that. While the National Football League celebrates its new Super Bowl champion, the Los Angeles Rams, this morning, the league still has a glaring race problem in which their players are overwhelmingly, I'm hearing feedback, I'm sorry, everybody just threw me off, but in which players are overwhelmingly black. Dr. Ben Chavis, our president and CEO, wrote a op-ed about the Rooney Rule, the so-called Rooney Rule, in which the NFL is supposed to hire or at least interview minority coaches. That has not translated into the hiring of Black and other minority coaches. We're going to talk about that this morning with Cheryl Smith of the Texas Metro News and James Wright of the Washington Informer. Good morning, James and Cheryl.
Good morning.
Well, we're so glad to have you. We know that we're going to talk about that in a moment. We know that the big game ended. It was a dramatic game. But first, the headlines this morning. Kodak Black, the rap star, was shot over the weekend after he attended a party with Justin Bieber. Among others who were shot, it was three others who were shot along with Kodak Black. He is believed to be in stable condition in West Hollywood. The 24-year-old Florida star and three others were all listed in stable condition. It's not immediately clear what sparked the fight outside the club in the 400 block of North La Cienega Boulevard, but an LAPD spokesperson said the victims were shot when they emerged from the club during the fight. The investigation into the shooting is ongoing. The LAPD said in a press release Saturday that they are searching for a black male suspect who fled south from the location. The incident occurred outside the Nice Guy Italian restaurant, and owner John Terzian confirmed that Justin Bieber was hosting a party inside the restaurant on the night of the shooting. According to footage obtained by, of course, TMZ, Kodak Black was leaving the restaurant with an entourage that included rapper Gunna. In the footage, they paused to pose for photos with fans surrounded by a dozen or more paparazzi. A fist fight amongst a group of men standing around a red Ferrari in the street spills back onto the sidewalk and is then where gunfire erupted. In the crowd included Jeff Bezos, his girlfriend Lauren Sanchez, Hamilton actor Anthony Ramos, Football Hall of Famer Tony Gonzalez, Haley Baldwin, Drake, Leonardo DiCaprio, Tobey Maguire, and members of the Jenner Kardashian family. But none of those celebrities were injured in this shooting, according to police. Also in the news this morning, in Act 1 of the Broadway musical Wicked, the character Glinda makes a dramatic entrance floating on stage in a magic bubble wearing a sky blue ball gown and a glittery tiara. She smiles and remarks, "It's good to see me, isn't it?" For Brittany Johnson, the latest good witch on the Great White Way, is good to be seen. Back in 2019, the actress made history as the first woman of color to play Glinda in the hit production going on as the understudy. Now she's poised to break barriers again, taking over full time as the show's first Black leading lady beginning today. She says, "I'm really excited for people to be able to see someone who looks like them on stage wearing the crown." She has used her platform to address representation and equity issues on Broadway. And she says, "As soon as I put that crown on, and there's something about wearing a crown, it's very special. It's fun." Wicked has been a blockbuster since its 2003 opening at the Gershwin Theater. It's based on a novel by Gregory Maguire, music and lyrics by Stephen Schwartz, and a book by Winnie Holzman. It also draws on the inspiration from The Wizard of Oz, the classic novel authored by L. Frank Baum more than a century ago. Also in the news this morning, while the biggest sports story, of course, is the Rams' dramatic 23-20 Super Bowl victory over the Cincinnati Bengals, but perhaps the biggest sports news from the eyes of history and Black America is Erin Jackson, who became the first Black woman to win a speed skating medal at the Winter Olympics, a gold one at that. Jackson won the 500 meters Sunday with a time of 37.04 seconds, giving the American speed skating program its first medal of the Beijing Games and first individual medal since 2010. But this one meant much more than national pride. The 29-year-old Jackson, a former inline skater who switched to the ice shortly before the 2018 Olympics, joined fellow American Shanny Davis as the only Black athletes to win long track speed skating medals at the Olympics. Now she says she wants others to follow their path. She says, hopefully this has an effect. Jackson said, hopefully we'll see more minorities, especially in the USA, getting out and trying these winter sports. James and Cheryl, a big day in speed skating at the Olympics, the first Black woman to do this.
Oh, absolutely wonderful. You went from one a place where you had me shaking my head, and then you move to a place where I'm constantly looking at the the assault, what's happening with our people, and the constant murders, and then you made me smile again when you talked about Wicked and talked about the speed skating. And this is something our young people need. You need to see it to believe it can happen. And that's so important because I've walked into television stations before as an adult, and I've challenged news directors and station managers and say, look at your wall. If someone walked in here, they would not think that they had a place here because no one on the wall looks like you. And then when you look at, if you see the ruler that has all the presidents of the United States, and then you see President Barack Obama, for futures, they can say, well, let's not make this be the last one. So I'm really encouraged. I really salute the women. And I think we need to understand, we need to wrap our arms around them, because one thing is historically happened with our women: when we ascend, the criticism comes, whether it's about their hair or different things that, their look, and we need to wrap ourselves around them, because to get where they are, it took a lot of hard work, a lot of sacrifices.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of flying under the radar this morning, which is why we bring it up here on the Black Press. This great victory, because it's going to mean something a lot more later, right, James? When you look at the history books.
You are absolutely right, Stacy. Cheryl brings up some really good points. This is out of the radar and it's out into the general public. Many African Americans, including myself, have kind of tuned out the Winter Olympics in Beijing because there's nothing there for me to really look at, or so we are led to believe. But her victory, her getting the gold medal in that field, just opens up the possibilities for young African Americans, as Cheryl said.
Yeah, and James, you raised an interesting point. I want to go back to Cheryl right quick on that too, because he said there's nothing there at the Beijing Olympics for him. Meaning, I imagine, James, meaning for Black people, right? And so,
Right.
Cheryl, when you think about that, we we're going to talk shortly about another topic that certainly the Rooney Rule, but in this case, when you think about the Olympics and the history, the impact Black people have had on the Olympics, yet it seems like the United States still does not send a good representation of Black athletes to the Olympics.
Only in certain sports, and they're usually not winter. But it's really interesting because you and I come from the East Coast, and there were three things that I know that we did. We went skating, we went bowling, and we went to the movies. There's family things where you think about the long weekend where people were celebrating Thanksgiving or doing holidays or whatever. That's what we did up north. And so there are a lot of skaters, and you were talking about how she transitioned to the ice.
Yes.
And it's really amazing to me, and I'm going to take this a little step and stay with me on it because it'll get you to the Rooney Rule about cheerleaders. When you look at the percentage, and last time I checked, it was like more than 65% of the men on the field look like you two. But when you look at the cheerleaders on the field, you know, what is less than 10%.
Mm.
And so folks say, well, they train differently. But you want to know something? These coaches and managers and trainers and everyone can go, and if they can go and make a basketball player out of somebody who's never played basketball, who is 20 years old and 7 feet tall, they can make them into that. So you just wonder, we need to take our children and make them into some of these other talents. If they're really good at skating, give them that outlet as a skater, and take them out there into that realm and show them something different. There's an HBCU that now is, they were announcing that they about a gymnastic program. Now Grambling did something over the summer with that, and we need to have those programs at our HBCUs because our young girls are there, and they dance, they tumble. I went back to FAMU for homecoming, and I saw, my chapter, Beta Alpha, the Delta just keep winning the step show. But I tell you, if I had to be in a step show with them, we would never have won, because they're doing all kind of somersaults and jumping all over the place. And that means we can do it too. We can do it too. And we need to push them to that.
To your point, I recently took my family to an NHL game in New York, and it was interesting to see as they were, because it's Black History Month, they were showing you all of the great feats that Black hockey players have accomplished, including, many might remember, if you don't know hockey too well, Grant Fuhrer, the goalie for the Edmonton Oilers, who won 5 Stanley Cups, and how great he was when he played. But there's so many, like you said, when Black people decide to do something, they seem to take over, and the New York Rangers are no exception. The Rangers are having one of their best seasons in years, led by 2 African Americans on that ice, and other teams, they're seeing more and more African Americans there. So once African Americans get involved or given an opportunity, it seems that we excel. James. And I think James is on mute.
I'm sorry. Thank you for educating me about the man you talked about in terms of hockey. That is a sport that we definitely can play a role, and like you just said, dominate. But hockey is expensive for the average African American young person. We can change that. And that is what we need to do. We need to expand to these other sports, because these sports are quite lucrative, personally, like tennis and golf. And, it doesn't just have to be Tiger or the Williams sisters and a few others. So you're absolutely right, Stacey.
Yeah, and we've seen, you mentioned golf and tennis. We've seen what happened there. You mentioned Serena and her sister, and golf. You mentioned Tiger. There are others. So just give us an opportunity, right? Hey, before we get to the Rooney Rule, before we went on live, I know you guys had some thoughts about the halftime show. I'm going to give you each a minute to talk about the halftime show. James, I know you mentioned you're being impressed with Snoop Dogg specifically. The halftime show. Tell us about the halftime.
Yeah, I'll give you 30 seconds. Full disclosure, I am a Michael Jackson and Prince person. So when I watched the hip hop show, I was just blown away. I was happy to see Dr. Dre with all of his multi-millions out there performing. I was just pleased to see Snoop Dogg still using some of those old moves that he had done in the 90s. And it's good to bring back the old hip hop, as we say. Now, I don't know what this stuff is now, but the old hip hop that is real and solid. But I love the show. It was great.
Well, for mine, and I will tell you that I've been, when they told me that Kaepernick was not playing, I saw no reason to watch.
That was it. You took a knee.
So I was just like, okay. And I just happened to be flipping when I saw Dr. Dre. I'm sorry that I missed Mary J, because women in rap need to be showcased. I love Snoop. And I'm old, and what I saw, I just saw a snippet of it, and I said I had to go back and look at it, and I want to show it some love. What I did see, I loved it, and the only thing that would have made it better for me if they would have did self-destruction, and they would have Public Enemy up there or something.
Well, there you go.
Then
Now,
that would have set it off for me. But
the,
I take a strong knee. I've taken it with my papers and my photographer. And I think I told you before that my photographer said, Cheryl, please let me cover the Cowboys. And he said, I'll get you that money shot. I said, the only money shot you can get me is Kaepernick on the field playing. Until I see, we go back to the color purple, until you do right by my people. Mm-hmm. And I guess I wouldn't double down so hard on it if there wasn't this paternalistic slave master mentality that I see from some of the owners. And when I see how they keep us down and how they control our men.
Well, as we segue beautiful Cheryl into the Rooney Rule, while the National Football League did celebrate the Super Bowl yesterday, it still has a glaring race problem. It's a league where 70% of the players are Black. Well, the ownership is lacking, but more importantly, or just as importantly, I should say, the lack of head coaches. When the Rooney Rule, which mandates that teams at least interview Black and other minorities for open head coaches position, when that was installed in 2003, just 2 years before that, there were 3 Black coaches in the NFL. Today, 20 years later, there are still just 3 Black coaches. There needs to be more representation. Dr. Chavis, president and CEO, wrote an op-ed about the potential of Robert F. Smith owning the Denver Broncos, but there needs to be more because the presumption is that if Black people owned it, we'll see more Black head coaches. But something has to be done, right, Cheryl?
Oh, most definitely. And I don't want to assume, but Mr. Smith, yes, we are related. We have to be, and tell him I said hello. But something has to be done. We can't put all the onus when he does become an owner. The travesties, we put all the onus on them to make right all the wrongs of all these other folks. We still have to hold them accountable. And it's interesting because the Rooney Rule, because I think about it, because corporate America, a number of corporations like Facebook have said, they have their own Rooney Rule. And for me, if you get people, there are hardcore folks in there who don't want you. You look at some of the records of some of the coaches who have been in there, and then I think about some of the coaches who are in college or in high school, and I think about, speaking of coaches, there's a big controversy in Texas, James, about the coach of the girls basketball team at Texas A&M and how she dresses. And I'm like, why do we have to constantly be subjected to things like this? But if Mr. Smith gets a team, I don't want us to come down harder on him than we've come down on these other folks for decades.
Well, and that's
concerned about.
Yeah, and that could be an issue, right? Looking into him to fix all of the wrongs, it would be too much. But James, we know the situation. Coach Brian Flores has filed a class action lawsuit against the NFL, claiming the league discriminated against Black coaches in their hiring practice. It was pretty clear that professional football has a race issue even before that. So now, they filled positions again. There were 9 open positions this offseason, and 7 of them were filled by white coaches. Where do we go from here, James?
Yeah, you're right. They were filled by white coaches, and I'm gonna make 2 quick points on that, Stacey. Number one, poor Lovie Smith. Lovie Smith is now the coach of the Houston Texans. So talk about putting a Black man in a position set up to fail. That is clearly what that is. The second point is that it's interesting that Cheryl is in Dallas because Bob Johnson, the former owner of BET, has long expressed his interest in owning the Dallas Cowboys. Now, we know that's not going to happen because Jerry Jones is not going to let that go for his life. But the point is that we do have blacks who want to be head coaches. They want to be owners and not just players on the field, but there are these systemic, and I'll use Dr. Chavis's favorite word, systemic racism that keeps them from that, even though we do have the capital in order to, and the experience, I should say, in order to obtain those positions. One small thing, not only is brother Robert Smith, I call him brother because we have a fraternal connection, he wants to own the Denver Broncos, but so does Byron Allen, who is owner of the Weather Channel. He's interested in owning the Broncos too.
Well, and I understand that the NFL actually approached Byron Allen, which was a very, very interesting thing, that they were the first to express some interest in having him as an owner. But isn't that, Cheryl, a little tokenism, if you will?
Well, did they hand pick who they want? They say that this is the type of owner we want. Well, I think they'll be in for a big surprise with Byron Allen. I think for sure, because and you look at all the television stations that he owns, and people are sleeping on Byron. They really are, and he's really speaking out about a number of issues, because we have so many issues in the media. When you talk about looking at what it looks like, I want you to look at what the news looked like after the game yesterday. What did the news look like in a lot of cities? Did you see, are we still dealing with that one person? We've made some strides. And you have women who are able to wear their natural hair and not have to wear other folks' hair. And we've seen some change, but we still have, it's just so amazing that we still have so far to go. An example I want to give you, a young intern in my office, I gave her a newsletter from 1994-ish, and it was from a group called the Warriors, and they were talking about what they wanted from the police department. Now, this young 30-year-old generation, I'd say alphabet, I don't know which one it is these days, because I contend that the naming of these generations, they weren't thinking about Black people anyway. That was a capitalistic situation. But she looked at the list and she said, these are the same things we're fighting for today. And I said, well, that shows you that we've always been fighting. We've been a fighting people. We're fighting so much. It's just a shame that we're still fighting to salvage our respect, because that's what it amounts to when you disrespect Coach Flores, when you disrespect a number. There are so many coaches that could have coached, and now you have people saying, oh, well, we're looking at Deion Sanders now. And are you looking at him because of what he brings to the table, the star quality that he brings to the table? Because I submit to you, there are a number of people, there's some people who played with him. They could be coached, who are African American.
Oh, absolutely.
Coaching as well. And so I am optimistic that Smith and Allen will get teams, and I'd like to see more, not just, but then you know what? Then just like those same coaches, same owners are a little leery right now. The moves that Deion Sanders has made has shook the NFL up. Would you all agree with me?
Well, yeah, certainly coming from where he's at directing talent to HBCUs that traditionally have gone to white institutions, and they've gone on to the NFL. But now Deion is certainly changing the game there. But James mentioned something else about Lovie Smith and being set up to fail. That's another issue too, right? That we should be mindful of, because sometimes they do give these jobs to African-American candidates when there is a no-win situation going on, James.
That's absolutely right. And that is just what Lovie is walking into with the Houston Texans. It is a vibrant franchise, but it has just not had good years recently. And then they expect the Black coach to turn things around. And when the Black coach does turn things around, then they'll go and hire a white person to replace that Black coach to go on to the Super Bowl or the playoffs. But this is not just the NFL, Stacey and Cheryl And Stacey and Cheryl, you know what I'm talking about. This is
Oh,
corporate
yes.
America. So this is a problem that we have to, as Cheryl just said, continually to fight.
Right.
Yeah, and we've
You
seen
think
that
about
situation.
cities, you think about, when a city gets majority Black, they give it to us when it's crashing and burning. And then we're supposed to make it. And guess what? Sometimes we do.
Yes.
Sometimes we do. We're looking at in Dallas, we have the Dallas Morning News, and they have an executive editor who is a Black woman. And there's some number issues here. And it was a move, but will she have the same resources? Just like with the coaches, will they have the same resources? Will they have the same benefits package? Will they have the same leverage that their white counterparts had? With this Rooney Rule, you look at, okay, yeah, we'll interview some, but you've had some coaches who have had winning records. You've had some who've had winning records and then one losing season, and they're fired. So, we'll play your game, Miss Affirmative Action, but we hold the strings ultimately, and that's what they're doing to us, not just in football, but across the board in a number of places. For them, the greater good is not always having one of them. They said we can find someone, who we can find someone who looks like us, and that's a good old boy. That's still a fraternity.
Yeah, and it's just as simple as this. Before we close, isn't it important when you have a league that's 70% people of color? Isn't it important to have that representation on the sidelines, not as assistant coach or some other type of strength and conditioning coach or whatever position? Isn't it important to have that head coach as an African American, given that most of, as Cheryl mentioned, the slave mentality earlier, and someone framed this, I can't take credit for this, and probably not going to say it exactly the way, and I can't remember who, but recently said, look, in the box above, you have the owners, right? And they all, then you have 90+% of the audience, of those in attendance at the games, white. But then on the field, you have the gladiators. On the sidelines, you have the coaches who are white. But then on the field, you have the gladiators who are Black. That picture, when you paint it that way, it becomes even more of a problem, doesn't it?
Well, I'm going to take you to, go even dive deeper. My Dorothy Gentry covers the Mavs for me, and she went to the Dallas Mavs had their annual ball, and the only person on the Mavs whole team that had a Black wife was Dirk Nowitzki. So what can I say?
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
you see it permeating through all levels, and you look at who is put in the face of it. It kind of boxes us out. It kind of boxes Black people out of the upper echelon, if you will, to be able to sit up there in a box with the owners.
Yeah.
Well, again, as stated, you got the gladiators on the field, right, and everybody else is getting pleasure out of them banging their heads against each other. But we'll continue to watch this Rooney Rule situation. The NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell said before the Super Bowl yesterday that he's concerned. He's concerned about the Brian Flores lawsuit.
What is he doing about it?
Yeah. Well, there you go, James. Speak on it.
He says he's concerned.
James is rolling his eyes. Talk about it, James.
He says he's concerned about it, but he's not doing anything about it. That's just talk, Commissioner. Just talk.
Well,
and what are you concerned about it that is happening? It's like when you steal something, are you concerned? Are you scared because you got caught, or what? What are you concerned about? Is this making you have sleepless nights? Are you having to spend money that you don't want to spend? Are you having to face reality? It has to come. There are people who make a conscious effort to do things and to do it right. And that's what I love about in basketball. That's what I love about Mark Cuban, because even something, this may seem like really small, but he even, especially during COVID, he would give his whole staff $25 a day for lunch, and he told them to spend it with a Black-owned restaurant.
Yep.
And it's
Indeed.
those little things. And Coach Rick Carlisle, who's no longer coach there, because we have Jason Kidd, he would start off their meetings with the Black history fact, with the history, and just not Black history, but history talking about inequities.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the type of things that you have to live it. You can't just live it for the cameras. And that concern for me coming a little late and a little
short.
just
Dollar, they late $1 short.
Yeah.
Kaepernick is still on the sideline, and that's a whole nother discussion, because I mean, look, it is obvious that of all the quarterbacks, and even certainly the second string quarterbacks, you can't tell me that a job couldn't have been found for that talented young man who himself went to the Super Bowl when he played. So it's a lot to be done in the NFL. And I'm going to leave you guys with my take on the halftime show. And that is, I would have been watching if it was Def Jam and not Death Row. I'm just East Coast. I'm like you, Cheryl. I'm East Coast. I like what Snoop has done. Dr. Dre certainly is a big success. Kendrick Lamar, 50 Cent, and all those guys. They did have Mary J. Blige representing for the woman. She's from the East Coast. But however, give me Run DMC, give me Public Enemy, give me Eric B. and Rakim, and we good to go.
Houdini.
You
yes. Want to give me some Cool Modi.
LL's out there in California. They could have got LL on that. So, and then I would have happily tuned in, because LL is the GOAT. And so look, I get it. I get Snoop and Dre and them. There's nothing wrong with them. They have made their mark. They are legends. But give me my like I said, Def Jam, and y'all can have your Death Row. So on that note, we thank you so much for watching. We certainly sorry for the early glitch this morning, but tune in tomorrow. We'll have more great news and great information for Black America. Thanks for joining Let It Be Known.